Hello everyone, and welcome to this legal briefing on the Opportunity for All white paper. As a bit of housekeeping before we start the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A functionality if you wish to ask a question, and I will answer any questions at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. My name is Thomas Emmett, and I'm the Head of Education at Burkitt Long. For those of you who don't know Burkitt Long, the firm has acted for educational institutions for decades. We support a range of organisations with the education sector across all areas of law. We've been involved in acting for clients in academising and in respect of school transfers. We offer a number of cost-effective fixed fee retainer solutions so that our clients receive direct access to a solicitor when they need it with cost certainty. Next slide, please. Now, moving on to the webinar and the agenda for the webinar, I will first introduce the white paper before moving on to look at the contents of each chapter. I will then give my views on the white paper and discuss what schools need to be planning for moving forward. Next slide, please. Before moving on to the substantive content of the webinar, I note that this presentation is for general purposes only, and the information is correct as at today, the 28th of April. Next slide, please. It is important to state at the outset that the white paper is not law. It is a guide to the direction of government policy. Notably, this is the first white paper on schools for 6 years. It is also worth noting that a number of government policies are included in the white paper that have already been and previously have been announced. Next slide, please. The white paper has two new ambitions. The first is for a target that has already been set, that is 90% of children leaving primary school to have the expected standard in reading, writing and maths. The other ambition is a new one, to increase the national GCSE average grade in both English language and maths from 4.5 to 5. The bulk of the white paper sets out ways that these two ambitions might be achieved. There is much emphasis on the intention to raise standards in schools with an aim of ensuring strong schools staffed with excellent teachers who will provide every child with targeted support in English and maths. Since it is important for every child to reach their full potential, there must be high standards in terms of curriculum, behaviour and attendance. Regarding behaviour, teachers in all state-funded schools will receive support in developing their expertise in managing behaviour and well-being through a fully funded national professional qualification in behaviour and culture. From the white paper, I would look out for revisions that need to be made to your policies in respect of the following: behaviour policies, and particularly in respect of government guidance. Aside from your policies, you need to look at changes in the guidance for suspension and permanent exclusions, which is statutory guidance. Also look at the behaviour in schools guidance, as that is likely to be subject to change too. These changes may affect how you monitor behaviour and exclusions in your school. You need to be ready to adjust those policies to fall in line with any updated guidance. Be aware also that the white paper suggests the DfE will launch a new national behaviour survey for school staff, pupils and parents. It's also worth noting the drive for early intervention in alternative provision settings, which is explored more in the SEN review. The SEN review sets out plans to prioritise early intervention to help pupils manage challenging behaviour at a younger age. Next slide, please. I'm sure everyone will welcome the commitment to provide 500,000 teaching training opportunities by 2024. The move towards £30,000 starting salaries to attract and retain teachers is also positive. But as the National Employers Organisation for School Teachers states, the policy needs to be seen in the wider context to support adequate supply and retention of future teachers and school leaders. There is a question as to whether it will be funded by providing additional funding or whether it have to be taken from existing budgets. Notably, the white paper is silent with regards to the workforce framework contained in the School Teachers Pay and Conditions document. These are statutory provisions which apply to all maintained schools, and a number of Academy Trust schools also follow the STPCD to a large extent. There is a significant consensus about the benefits of a national pay and conditions framework. Initial teacher training providers need to be ready for Ofsted inspections in the near future. Next slide, please. The paper also proposes introducing a leadership level SENCO national professional qualification for new SENCOs. The white paper recognises the significance of the SENCO role in schools and ensuring professional development for SENCOs that builds on the wider golden thread of teaching reforms. Other notable policies in the chapter are a new scholarship to attract top language graduates and a new initial teacher training course. Next slide, please. Much of the white paper is dedicated to raising levels of literacy and numeracy in schools, and it states that we can expect a new test of literacy and numeracy taken by a sample of children in Year 9 to estimate performance at a national level. Many teachers will be reminded here of the days of key Stage 3 SATs. The full detail of what the new test might look like is yet to be revealed, but according to the white paper, it will consist of a short series of digital activities undertaken by a small number of children in school. Good attendance at school plays a vital role in children's development and for their well-being. The white paper suggests that new legislation will be established to set out statutory expectations for local authority attendance services. There will also be a new system for recording attendance, which will highlight any concerning attendance patterns. It is yet to be decided when the local authority attendance service is going to be announced. Schools will be expected to work with local authorities to get a better picture of the numbers of children not attending school. Any new national framework needs to provide clarity for parents, take full advantage of the discretion given to head teachers to initiate formal legal intervention, and should encourage preventative intervention for long-term absence issues. Regarding admissions generally, new statutory framework will change the academy admission system. None of these changes are in place yet, and your school doesn't need to take any immediate action. However, be aware that the white paper sets out plans that Trust will have a new statutory obligation to follow the school admissions code. Trust will have a new statutory duty to cooperate with local partners and other trusts, including on admissions. Local authorities will have ultimate responsibility in making sure every child is allocated an appropriate school place, and local authorities will take on responsibility for all in-year admissions. Local authorities will receive a backstop power to force Trust to take on pupils and to object to a school's published admissions plan, subject to a consultation, but details are yet to be released. This process, including the role of local governing bodies, has not yet been fully set out by the Department for Education either. Overall, schools are advised to continue to prioritise attendance, and if they haven't done so already, prepare an attendance policy. It is to be welcomed the commitment to continue support for Ofsted's work to scrutinise and challenge off-rolling, and the proposal for legislation to increase Ofsted's powers to inspect schools that are operating illegally without registration. Next slide, please. Schools will be expected to provide a 32.5-hour school week. This applies to mainstream state-funded schools. It's not a statutory requirement, although Ofsted will consider it as a part of its quality of education judgment. Sorry, I've just lost my screen there for a second. Schools are encouraged to provide 2 substantive sessions each school day. It is likely this is a requirement for hours on the school site rather than learning hours, and therefore the time can be spent in break or form time or on extracurricular activities, although this won't include after-hour activities. Your school is expected to meet these hours from existing budgets by September 2023 at the latest. However, it's likely you already provide these hours and most schools won't have to make any changes to meet these requirements. Special schools, people referral units and alternative provision providers are not expected to meet this measure. Your school should work towards extending and enriching the school week, as stated in the white paper, where appropriate. The Department for Education says that it remains committed to improving the uptake of baccalaureate subjects and will continue to drive improvements in access to high quality language teaching to realise this. From 2023, therefore, it will seek to establish a network of modern foreign language hubs and introduce more effective continuous professional development courses for language teachers in both primary and secondary schools. Next slide, please. Some other important proposals in Chapter 2 include the fact that it's been proposed that updated plans be released to support sport and music education, and a new cultural education plan will come out in 2023. There'll be a new careers programme for primary schools in areas of disadvantage and improved professional development for teachers and leaders on careers education. And there are plans to turn Open National Academy into a new arm's length curriculum body, offering free adaptable digital curriculum resources and video lessons free for all teachers. Next slide, please. Schools will be required to inform parents if their child is falling behind in English and maths and detail the progress they're making. This will be monitored by Ofsted. A school is expected to provide evidence-based support when pupils fall behind. Teachers should monitor pupils' progress in English and maths using robust assessment. This will be an expectation across England, and all schools should monitor pupil progress in English and maths using robust assessment. Schools will need a system for responding to what this shows, both in terms of adjustments to classroom practice and providing additional support for children who need it, drawn from the growing evidence base of effective support approaches. The Department for Education says that, in partnership with Ofsted, it will set out further guidance on targeted support and the use of effective assessment. The white paper also says that there must be a response system, including adjusting classroom practice and providing additional support for those children who need it. Targeted support for all pupils should complement support for pupils who have special educational needs. Next slide, please. Schools will be expected to use tutoring as a staple offer for intervention and are expected to make tutoring available to every pupil who needs it. Tutoring will be a core academic option that schools can spend pupil premium funding on. Regarding pupil premium, the DfE is developing a menu of approaches for pupil premium spending. This is designed to help your school make decisions about how best to support schools, especially with numeracy and literacy skills. Next slide, please. The Education Endowment Foundation will be funded with at least 100 million, so it can continue its crucial work to build the evidence base for at least the next decade. The Education Endowment Foundation will work with a new arm's length curriculum body that will be established to ensure high quality and relevant resources. Schools will be able to access a digital curriculum and online resources for every subject. The resources are designed to reduce workload so teachers can concentrate on delivering lessons and spend less time creating new resources. The document also commits to providing over £55 million for the Accelerator Fund to develop and scale up the best evidence literacy and numeracy interventions, spreading effective programmes to every corner of the country, in the words of the government. The result, according to the white paper, will be cutting-edge, evidence-based programmes directly informing the best practice targeted support schools will implement. Next slide, please. For academies, by 2030, all schools will be part of a multi-academy trust or will have plans to join or form one. There are no current measures to force well-performing schools to become academies. So just to be clear, this is obviously relevant to maintain schools as well. Local authorities will have the power to request that school joins some trusts, and local authorities will also have the power to launch a new multi-academy trust. But this will be limited to areas where there is a shortage of existing trusts. The white paper notes that trusts typically start to develop central capacity when they have more than 10 schools. Therefore, converting schools to standalone academies will not be approved by the DfE, and instead schools should create or join a multi-academy trust. Existing single academy trusts and small MATs should now also be putting plans in place to expand to a minimum of 10 schools. The only exception will be for bids for high quality free schools that may open initially as standalone trusts. For clarity, there is no maximum size of trust, but the proportion of schools in a local area that can be run by an individual trust will be considered by the regional directors. Next slide, please. The proportion of schools a trust can run in a particular area will be capped, though no cap will be imposed on trust size overall. In the long term, a regulatory review will be held in May 2022, looking at accountability and regulation, including how trusts are held to account through inspection in the future. A definition of trust strength will also be provided. A consultation will be held in respect of the exceptional circumstances in which a good school could request that the regulator agrees to the school moving to a stronger trust. Next slide, please. In terms of school improvement, strong trust will be solely accountable for delivering a high standard of education for children, with churches and other faith groups continuing to offer a distinctive education through a network of trusts. To ensure that all parties play their role, a new collaborative standard requiring that trusts work constructively with each other, their local authorities and the wider public and third sectors will also be introduced. Next slide, please. The white paper also contemplates pooling or top slice mechanisms in multi-academy trusts being subject to new transparency measures which the government say will ensure that it is always clear to parents how the flexibility is being used. Unless handled carefully, this particular transparency will result in resource sapping applications to the High Court for judicial review by parents, second guessing the operational decisions of MATs, which will undermine the benefits of central critical mass that the white paper is trying to encourage. In exceptional circumstances, good schools may be able to request moving trust, and there will be a 3-year £86 million pot earmarked for trust capacity funding, with extra financial support for dioceses to launch trust following the pilot. Next slide, please. Other measures include a new CEO development scheme open to executive heads and senior trust staff. There'll be a consultation that proposes new powers to force coasting maintained academy schools to convert or change trusts, and the regional schools commissioners will be rebranded as regional directors. Next slide, please. The DfE will consider bids for high quality standalone trust-free schools, but avoid converting schools to standalone academies. There'll be a £40 million fund for 24 priority areas among the 55 disadvantaged education investment areas to address particular needs such as literacy, numeracy or absence. Next slide, please. There is an emphasis on safeguards for faith schools and selective schools in respect to the academisation process. We strongly advise all schools and trusts not already in a position to align with the DfE stated policy of being in a multi-academy trust of 10 schools or at least 7,500 pupils to develop a strategic plan to get there. Although it will not be straightforward for the DfE to compel that outcome, its use of academy standards and likely development of more confidence in intervening in the leadership and governance of trust measures measured against those standards will probably give the DfE the legal tools to implement this element of the white paper. Next slide, please. On councils, very quickly, councils will get backstop powers to force trust to admit children and to object to schools' published admission numbers. And councils will be able to launch their own MATs, but the focus will be where too few strong trusts already exist. Next slide, please. Further, there will be a new system of proactive assurance with local safeguarding partnerships commissioning safeguarding audits every 3 years. Next slide, please. And then turning to our view on the white paper, it is clear from the white paper that the drive for schools to form and join MATs is stronger than ever. The impacts all schools, including current single academy trusts, which will need to form or join a strong family of 10 schools or have plans in place to do so by 2030. Schools should start to have those conversations as soon as possible in order to ensure that they determine the MATs that they will be a part of and have longer term plans to build these MATs to a minimum of 10 schools. The Department for Education's new Regions Group, previously the Regional School Commissioners, will also work with local partners to develop plans which achieve this based on local dialogue about which collaborations will best serve the interests of children and parents. In the interim, all schools should expect an Ofsted inspection against the current inspection framework by the end of summer 2025. This includes outstanding schools that were until recently exempt from routine inspection. We await with interest the further consultation and then legislation that will be required to implement this significant white paper. Next slide, please. I'd like to thank you for listening. If you have any comments on the presentation today, I'd be grateful to receive them, and you can follow the link on the screen to answer our survey. Next slide, please. Just like to make you aware of a further event that will be happening in May. And this is a guide to SEN law for SENCOs, which we hope will be of use to the SENCOs of schools in Essex and across the country. Next slide, please. And then we turn to the question part of the webinar. Katie, who is working with me today, are there any questions at all?
No, Tom, we've only actually had one question, which is whether we can make the slides available after the event, which that came from somebody anonymous. So I think the best thing is if they email you using the contact details at the end, and then we can make a PDF available to anybody that would like them.
Absolutely. And of course, if anyone has any questions they'd prefer to ask sort of outside this forum, then please do contact me via email. And Katie, I think the next slide has my details. So if the person who wishes to obtain the slides, if they just send me an email, we're happy to sort that out for you. And if there are any questions, please feel free to give me a call or send me an email. On that basis, I hope you found today's webinar useful, and thank you again for joining us.